The New Orleans Saints aren't officially eliminated from the playoffs, but they're logically eliminated from the playoffs. So why should you be watching? I've got a couple of reasons for you. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to tell you how the New Orleans Saints are still worth watching here as the season comes to an end, because it's not just folks that are auditioning to be a part of the New Orleans Saints future. The New Orleans Saints are on the stage auditioning as well. I'll tell you what I mean by that. We'll also take a look at Darren Rizzi's biggest chance right now coming up against the Green Bay Packers on Monday night, and the young stars who have a chance to shine and show that they have the ability to be a part of the building blocks of the New Orleans Saints future. We appreciate you as always, whether it's your first time or your next time, for making us your first listen or for being an everydayer here on the Locked On Saints podcast, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As we get closer and closer to Christmas, I do want to say happy holidays to everybody. Merry Christmas to you. Thank you very much for joining us for another episode of Locked On Saints. Listen, it's easy sometimes around this time of year to get a little bit disenchanted with a team that is kind of still scratching and clawing at the opportunity to be a part of the postseason, right? The New Orleans Saints have to win out. They effectively need the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to lose out. They need the Falcons to drop a couple more games as well. It just doesn't seem very likely, especially considering that the Saints right now are playing the 16th hardest schedule with the Green Bay Packers, Las Vegas Raiders, and then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the way. And then, of course, you have two very easy schedules for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons the rest of the way, who play a collection of teams like the Cowboys and the Panthers and the New York Giants, for instance. So the likelihood of the New Orleans Saints getting into the playoffs is estimated at about 0.9%, less than 1%. But you should still be watching. And one of the big reasons why is because the New Orleans Saints are going to be looking at some of their young potential stars to prove that they can be young stars and building blocks for this New Orleans Saints future. The New Orleans Saints future is, well, kind of uncertain at this moment. Not uncertain in a bad way. We just don't know who's the head coach they're going to hire, what direction that head coach is going to take things in, what the offense will look like, what the defense will look like, all of these other pieces. So the individual players who are going to be on the field, especially the young guys that are still on rookie contracts or maybe are only on their second contract, things like that, have a real opportunity to prove that they deserve to be a part of and belong as a part of whatever the future of this New Orleans Saints franchise is. So I want to break down a couple of players that I think you should be keeping an eye out on and that make the rest of the season worth watching. And we'll start off, of course, with quarterback Spencer Rattler. Quarterback Spencer Rattler has been given a clean slate. The New Orleans Saints kind of look at those first three games that he started as, kind of different than this opportunity that's ahead of him, and certainly are impressed and were pleased with what they saw up against the Washington Commanders, especially considering that Spencer Rattler didn't get any reps with those first team guys that he led 4 straight scoring drives with up against the Washington Commanders when they were a ball off the hands to away from winning that football game. So there's a lot of, I don't want to say expectation, because I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think that there is expectation around Spencer Rattler within the building. There's no doubt about that. But I think really going into this game, it's more so about the excitement of the opportunity to get to see what it is that he's going to be able to do. When I spoke with him one-on-one a few weeks ago, one of the things that he talked about was using his legs more. He's absolutely going to have that opportunity in a snow game, or maybe going to the air, or a potential snow game, a very cold weather game at least, which Rattler is accustomed to, having played in Oklahoma, the Big 10, Big 12, all of that. And so, he'll get the opportunity to utilize his legs, because going to the air might not always be the best option for these two teams, depending upon what the conditions are like. So Spencer Rattler, obviously, and his potential here to prove that he can be the post-Carr guy here is a big deal going towards the end of the season. So whether you're watching it because you're a fan of Spencer Rattler, or you're watching it because you're a fan of the team in general, getting an opportunity to see a potential look at the potential future of this team at the most important position is obviously a reason to cut on Monday Night Football this week. The other player that I'm looking at over on the offensive side, or other couple of players I'm looking over on the offensive side, are going to kind of be showcased a little bit more in the run game, although maybe that's not necessarily entirely true. But anyway, the run game will give you a good glimpse of these guys. It's running back Kendre Miller and it's left tackle, rookie left tackle Taliese Fuaga. Taliese, of course, is going to shine when it comes to pass protection as well. Has not a lot of pressure. I believe it's in 3 of the last 4 games. Has not allowed a pressure in 5 games already so far this season through just, 14 played. So seeing him, getting the opportunity to see him continue to develop, the Saints might have their perennial Pro Bowl, all-pro left tackle that they've been searching for since Teron Armstead's departure. And while he might not get those accolades here his rookie season, he's certainly showing you that he's deserving of those accolades if he can continue the trajectory that he's already on here as a first-year player. As for running back Kendre Miller, in his second year, he's looked pretty excellent for New Orleans over the course of the past 2 weeks since he's been back from injured reserve. Him coming back, scoring a touchdown on a really, really tough run up against the New York Giants, and then also being the guy last week that averaged 5.1 yards per carry, having to come in and have sort of a larger role in that second half of the game after Alvin Kamara caught that touchdown pass in the Saints' first offensive drive of the third quarter. That ended up kind of tweaking this, what was believed to be before minor groin injury, but then it worsened it in that moment when he outstretched to make that outstanding one-handed catch. Alvin Kamara is considered week to week, but Darren Rizzi said it's not looking great for him this weekend. So that's going to put Kendre Miller kind of in the lead role when it comes to that running back room. And maybe we see some Jamal Williams. Perhaps we see some Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's so excited to see his name on the back of that jersey. I spoke with him during Fridays or after Friday's practice in the locker room. Awesome dude, super excited to be here in New Orleans. So maybe we get an opportunity to see him. Both Jamal Williams and he have a lot of experience playing in cold weather games as well. So the Saints do have those young guys over on the offensive side to watch out for, and more, right? Trevor Penning has looked really good since he moved over to left tackle. Eric McCoy is one of the better centers in the NFL, not one of the best centers in the NFL. Foster Moreau has looked awesome here down the stretch and really throughout the entire season. You've got some young options at wide receiver as well. But I think that those 3 guys really highlight in terms of guys on rookie contracts within their first couple of years, proving that they can be the long-term building blocks or a part of the long-term vision of this team. Over on the defensive side, you're looking at cornerbacks Kool-Aid, McKinstry, and Alontae Taylor. They're going to be tested on Monday night up against Jordan Love and Christian Watkins and Jaden Reed and all those guys that want to, Romeo Doubs, these guys that want to take advantage of those big plays down the field. Defensive tackle Bryan Bresee, another big one to watch, especially with Josh Jacobs in the run game for the Green Bay Packers and trying to put pressure on Jordan Love. It's youth versus youth in this game. It's just that one set of youth, the New Orleans Saints, doesn't have as much experience together as the other set of youth, the Green Bay Packers. So this is going to be a bit of, I don't want to call it iron sharpens iron, right? Because we've been down that road before, but you know what I mean. The youth against the youth, right? It's not going to be something to where it's going to be a total showing of, old school versus new school, although there will be some of those elements for both sides of the football, don't get me wrong. But I do think that the youth in this game, going up against the youth in this game, is going to be something that allows you to be able to see what a bit of this New Orleans Saints future could look like. And speaking of the New Orleans Saints future, one of the biggest question marks this offseason, of course, the biggest question mark this offseason, is going to be whether or not the New Orleans Saints roll with Darren Rizzi or look for another head coach. So what I want to dive into next is why this Monday Night Football game parallels the game that might have won Dennis Allen the job and could potentially, therefore, win Darren Rizzi the job. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy made easy, and it's the most fun way to play daily fantasy as well. We're talking about ways to keep this, or why, the reasons that the end of this season for the New Orleans Saints still very exciting. Well, the same thing goes across the entire NFL and with the college football playoffs. This is an action-packed weekend of football, and if you want to make it all the more exciting, Prize Picks is the way to go. They'll set projections for players in each of these games. All you have to do is choose more or less on 2 to 6 players. Get those right. You can win up to 1,000 times your entry, and they're making it even easier right now with Picksmas all throughout December, giving you 2 free picks. You can check it out. Give you an example here. Jared Goff, 230 passing yards, more or less. 2 to 6 players, get them right, win money. That's simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup with the Prize Picks app and the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Prize Picks, run your game. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-game format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all of the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss out on a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Doing a quick show for you today since it's the weekend. Don't want to take up too much of your time, but just looking at some of the big reasons why you should still be enjoying some New Orleans Saints action this week and all that, especially with it being on Monday Night Football. Like that's enough, right? You're gonna be around family, Christmas Eve, all that good stuff. So that's kind of a built-in reason. But just looking at what you should be watching for with this team, because it's a question that I've been getting like almost every radio call that I've done, every interview that I've done, all this stuff is like, why should fans be watching? Well, I think that those young cornerstones, potential cornerstones, right? Those young guys trying to prove they are cornerstones is a big part of it. But you also look at the biggest story for this team over the course of the offseason, which is the head coach search. And this game on Monday Night Football mimics the game in a way that won Dennis Allen the job years ago. You remember a few years ago, a 9-0 victory on the road in Tampa on primetime. I believe it was a Sunday Night Football game. But it was a 9-0 victory where Dennis Allen had to step in and be the head coach in that game, right? He was effectively an interim head coach for that game because Sean Payton was out with COVID. And so he ends up taking the team to Tampa, and in a very Taysom Hill heavy game, which is a missing ingredient for this game for Darren Rizzi, right? But in a very Taysom Hill heavy game, ends up winning an absolute slugfest 9-0. And that's when we all went, okay, he's going to be the guy, right? Like the Saints were going to interview, they were going to do the whole thing. They were going to, do their due diligence, everything. We knew that, but it became kind of a certainty at that point that Dennis Allen was going to be the next head coach. Now, you look at this year, here in 2024, Darren Rizzi taking the team on the road, on national television, to Green Bay, in a game that's probably going to need to be a little bit of a slugfest, depending upon the weather conditions and what they actually turn out to be. There's, forecasts right now that it's going to be like 25, like mid-20s, some snow, all that. So that's going to end up factoring into this game, and it might keep this game down to being a ground game. A lot of Kendre Miller, a lot of Josh Jacobs, a lot of scrambling and running from Jordan Love, a lot of scrambling, running design runs from Spencer Rattler, which I intend to ask him about later on as well. Does he want to see design runs? Is that something that he wants to see more of in this offense? Because we haven't seen a ton of it designed for him so far, but also, right, like things were different for him going into this past game when he went in and in the second half, so they probably didn't get an opportunity to really even put those things into the game plan. But you could see that potentially as a part of the game plan this week. So for this game, you have a guy like Darren Rizzi, who the extra element here is the fact that he'll have the mobile, young, rookie quarterback. So if he were to go to Green Bay and win that game, it might not solidify everything because, again, the Saints are going to do their due diligence. And look, if somebody interviews better and if somebody's a better candidate, that person is going to interview better and that person is going to be a better candidate, right? Like that's something we always have to kind of keep in mind here. But it certainly becomes a very important game for Darren Rizzi. If he loses this game, if the team loses this game with him at the helm, it doesn't fully rule him out as the guy that's going to have his interim tag removed and could potentially become the head coach next year. But winning this game certainly goes a long way towards making that happen, especially the situation, right? The New Orleans Saints are ending this season exactly as they began it after the 2-game win streak, right? 2-game win streak was a different story. But beginning in week 3, we saw this team become what? Injury riddled. They're ending the season what? Injury riddled, right? They got their full offensive line back for a 3rd game in a row, which is excellent, right? None of those guys missed practice this week. Awesome to see. But no Derek Carr, no Alvin Kamara. Chris Olave's been working his way. I don't know that he'll get back on the field, but certainly is putting himself in conversation. Then you saw, of course, the injury to Taysom Hill here recently, all those other things. So they're ending the season just like they began it. But they have the ability now to be able to say that they can navigate that in a way that they couldn't navigate it over the course of the 7-game win streak under Dennis Allen. And so if Darren Rizzi can lead the navigation of that, right, the navigation of that adversity, it would end up becoming the most important line on his resume, at least over the course of the 8 games as an interim head coach this season. Previously, to me, his best performance was the decision-making throughout that Washington Commanders game, making the tough decision to bench a first-time starter, go to the rookie quarterback, and keep everybody's heads up, and choosing to go for 2 at the end of that game. I think that was his best showing of why he did deserve, like of the positive right there, but he's got an opportunity to build on that this week with a win against the Green Bay Packers. And make no mistake about it, not only is Darren Rizzi auditioning for the New Orleans Saints are still auditioning for all the other coaching candidates out there, right? Drew Brees did an interview here recently, and he talked about his pick if the Saints weren't to hire Darren Rizzi, if they were to go outside of the organization. He, of course, mentioned Aaron Glenn. Makes sense that he would say that, right? That Aaron Glenn was on the coaching staff when Drew Brees was here. Of course, that's who he's going to mention. But also, not a bad choice. Not a bad choice. And he's this equal sort of blend between something familiar and something new, where I think if you're not going to bring back Darren Rizzi, just go for something entirely new, but that's just me. But I see the value of a little bit of the continuity, at least like not even the continuity, it's really the familiarity. I don't think there's a lot of continuity there, but it's really the familiarity. And then you've already seen, like, I can't remember if it was the NFL or if it was one of the NFL network social media accounts sharing, Aaron Glenn delivers an impassioned speech, right? Like the canvassing for Aaron Glenn is already underway. And so, great. You still got to prove to that guy that he wants this job, though. And you still got to prove to that guy that there are things in this organization, that there are players on the field, that there are coaches on the coaching staff, so on and so forth, that are deserving of him becoming their head coach, right? And you can replace Aaron Glenn with Ben Johnson. You can replace him with Liam Cohen. You can replace him with Bobby Slowick. You can replace him with Brian Flores. Whomever, doesn't matter. Kevin Minter, doesn't matter, right? Whoever your favorite head coach is, the Saints are still auditioning for that head coach to say, hey, we've got something you want. And here's a nationally televised game where they have to avoid getting embarrassed up against an up against an opponent for which they are outmatched on paper. Okay. I don't think the Saints are going to get embarrassed. I think that the 14.5-point spread that FanDuel and some of the other that FanDuel has given is outrageous, especially in the weather conditions. But if they surrender that 14.5-point spread, that stinks for them big time, right? In terms of their audition of showing all these other things. So I think that this game is just as important for the New Orleans Saints as a whole to show something, right? To show we have the building blocks. We have this player. We've got that player. We're going to manage the salary cap situation. Whatever it is that they want their statement to be, this is an opportunity to make that statement in front of the entire NFL world on national television. So just as important as it is for each of those individuals, it's important for Gail Benson, the owner. It's important for Mickey Loomis, the general manager. It's important for this team to be able to show, hey, there's something here you want to be a part of. We'll see if they're able to do that. And that's why you should be watching this week and throughout the rest of the season, because they've got 3 more games to prove all of that. And you've got 3 more games for all of those people to prove all the things that they have left to prove. We appreciate you very much for joining us for a bonus episode here this weekend. I'm going to try to get another one out on Sunday because we're about to head to practice here in just a little bit. So with that, I'm sure we'll have some new news. Spencer Rattler will probably more officially be named the starter at that point. We can get past the, will Derek Carr, won't Derek Carr kind of gamesmanship. But once that happens and, we can kind of look ahead to more specifics of the game, we can do that tomorrow as well. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to send those along. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.